Very special Metro Monday, sort of like a pop-up networking opportunity. I talked to Alan about it, who is just an avid participant of our Silver Line Committee Metro Monday, and he offered to allow us to come to his office, and Roseanne Beatty also encouraged us to participate with a principal here at DVI. We're so appreciative of this opportunity. This evening we're very proud to have Delegate Ken Plum. Please give him a round of applause because he served a long time in the General Assembly. How many years at the General Assembly?
44.
44.
Wow.
And he's officially retiring this year. Wow. And he and his wife are going to pick up their tours of Europe. They usually spend 2 or 3 weeks, and when COVID happened, of course, that kind of went to the wayside. So we're very grateful to have him. We're also very proud to have the Mayor of Herndon, Sheila Holmes. And we're very pleased to have Dennis Holsty, who's the head of economic development for the town of Herndon. And we're very pleased to have the past president of the Dulles Regional Chambers, who's one of the longest serving presidents of a Chamber of Commerce in the United States, Aaron Curtis.
Is that right?
Yeah, isn't that awesome? So, if I may get started, if you don't know about the Silver Line Committee, we began in the fall of 2017 as far as planning, and we kicked off in January of 2018. From that point forward, we basically met about 9 times during the year. Our focus was commerce, community, and communications. What our intentions were to bring political leaders from federal, state, and local and county governments, both at Fairfax and Loudoun County, economic development authorities from both counties, business leaders from development industry investing in the rail stations, and local business leaders whose companies have made a mark in the region. And our topics were those that impact rail to Dulles. We, of course, started with the Herndon Station, Innovation Center Station, Dulles Airport Station, the rail yard at Dulles, Loudoun Gateway, and of course into Ashburn. Now, if you're in Loudoun County, you will stay that the Silver Line begins in Loudoun. So, we're very pleased to have covered a lot of topics, and I won't go into those today, but we have truly covered everything one could think of, including an innovation district, the Silver Line impact on regional workforce, the key of attracting and retaining qualified employees, future of retail after COVID-19, and one of the things that Alan led was repopulating and re-engaging employees after COVID-19. And a lot of things were in our discussions about affordable housing. Then we came back to repurposing buildings along the Silver Line. We're very pleased to have one of our most dedicated sponsors, Fairfax Public Access, Channel 10, here today. And what you need to know is that if you go on FPA Metro Monday on YouTube, after it's shown on Channel 10 over a period of a couple of weeks, and it takes Jerry about 3 weeks to get it prepared, and then it's shown, then it goes to YouTube. You can see every Metro Monday. Jerry has been totally dedicated to the process and covered all of our events. We're so grateful. Thank you so much, Jerry. To talk about our members of our committee, you probably all know Scott York. He was former chairman of the Board of Supervisors for Loudoun County, president of York Consulting, and currently the executive director of the Committee for Dulles. We have Dennis Holsey, the economic development manager for the town of Herndon. Chris Hunter, the business retention manager for the Department of Economic Development for Loudoun. Marcia McAllister, who just retired as a communications manager for the Dulles Quarter Rail Project, and I believe she was honored at Dulles Area Transportation Association's event recently. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but I know Marcia. Melissa McKenna, our president of the chamber, was with her. And we have Dusty Smith, the communications manager for Loudoun County Public Affairs. Al Hansen, our director of architecture for DBI Architects, and myself. It gives me an honor and privilege to introduce you to Roseanne Beatty. You won't believe this lady. Drawing over 40 years of industry experience, Ms. Beatty contributes significantly to DBI's overall strengths, adding both depth and breadth of firm's collective and evolving body of knowledge, focusing her career on large government and institutional clients, as well as substantial balance of private sector work. She has held the longest running contracts at DBI, managing projects for the World Bank, International Finance Corporation, and the International Monetary Funds for 18 years. Wow, awesome. And you have to know why this is, how she's done this. Roseanne believes that the success of both short and long-term projects depends on several factors. And when I read this, I thought, am I doing this in my business? Maintaining schedules, deadlines, and being responsive to the client's concerns, defining the problem at hand, and finding the best, yet most cost-effective solution. Having the ability to adapt to change as projects evolve in scope. Haven't we all been through that? And anticipating and resolving challenges before they arise. For Roseanne, long-term clients, she and DBI have responded to more than 5,000 individual task orders. Please welcome Roseanne Beaver.
Georgia, thank you very much. That was really quite an introduction. I have a funny story. Well, it's funny to me anyway. When I first was looking for employment, I had a job downtown with an architectural firm, and I was very unhappy there, but because all I got to do was draw bathrooms because I was the only woman in the office. So it was one bathroom after another. I was so sick of it. So I decided to branch out and see if I could get another job. So I interviewed with Al Storm and Ken Catterton because I had never done any interiors work in my career ever. And I said, well, you know, I'd like to stay here for a year and just learn a little bit about interiors so I can take that and move that forward to, you know, another core and shell design firm. 40 years later, here I am. I never left. It's always been so much fun and so challenging, and you meet so many diverse people. You have an opportunity to, to work with engineers, other architects, a diverse set of clientele. And it's just been a blast. You know, I've never had a dull moment in those 40 years. And sometimes people ask me, well, do you regret, being on the interior side? And I say, heck no. I've enjoyed it so very much because it moves so quickly and it's so more fast-paced than the standard core and shell sort of building design process. So, but anyway, that's where I began.
It's the pretty part too.
But Al Storm, sends his regards from Greece. He's very disappointed that he can't be here and that he's missing the event. But he's having a great time. I spoke to him this afternoon. As George said, I've been a principal since 2006 here at the firm. But let me tell you a little bit about how we landed here at Fairway Executive Center. I have a few notes I'll read from, but going back in time, Al Storm was an investor in our previous headquarter location, which is at 1325 Mass Avenue. Now I'm going back to 1986 to 1996. And Al felt that, he wanted to continue, being an investor in DBI spaces. And at the time, we had obviously a Washington, D.C., which was considered our headquarters office. But we've always had a satellite Tyson's office since 1984, where we had a staff of like 6 to 10 interior designers and architects for many years since '84. But then by 2004, we had really outgrown our space at 7799 Leesburg Pike, and we were trying to figure out where we wanted to go. And we just felt that reaching a little further west and reaching out to this set of clients out in this area was the path of the future for us, where we would actually garner a lot of work from the development community in the Reston, Herndon metro area. And in hindsight, boy, it really worked. And then we also knew that Metro was coming. It had been approved, obviously, by WMATA in 2002, but who knew that it was going to take until 2014, right, for the first station to open.
It's his fault.
But anyway, so, on a lark, we started looking at properties out here, and as Al pointed out, with the help of the late Bill Lauer, we isolated a few properties, and this one really, was affordable and piqued our interest to the maximum degree. So in 2002, Al Storm formed a three-way equitable partnership with Tetra Development and Dietz Construction. So he figured he had the architecture, the developer, and the contractor all lined up, all owning this building. So that's how the deal was structured. So it got underway in 2004, and it delivered in 2006. And originally it was only supposed to be 3 floors. But because Al Storm committed to this 10,000 square foot lease in the building, we actually added a 4th floor to the building, which has just been a delightful place to be, as you can tell up here in the treetops. Plus, you'll have to check out our wonderful balcony, okay, before you leave. But
And Roseanne, here's a site plan, an
Mhm.
early
Oh,
site
I'm sorry.
plan.
Thank you, Al. Yeah, a very early site
You know,
plan.
what we had in mind. And what
Yeah.
as you said, it was very
Yeah.
inexpensive relative,
Right.
considering where it's located. But
Yeah.
I'm also looking at the topography, and as you can see, when
Right.
you come in, you can drive straight into the top of the parking deck. You drive down a little further,
Yeah.
middle deck,
As
bottom.
they
You
did.
come in. I mean, we really had to work that site to make it work.
Yeah, and then we delivered a 214-car garage as well, along with this building. But Al wanted to make sure you knew this. The investor group had 4 main goals. Find a beautiful site for a 50,000 square foot office building that became 61,000. Find a location near the Silver Line Metro. Find an affordable site where the build value would increase over time. And, at the time, Metro was so far away, that nobody really considered that land value increase when he bought, right? So over time, it's definitely increased a lot. But then relocate DBI, the Virginia office, to Reston and be a major leaseholder to assist with the development financing. So, and with DBI's involvement in long-term lease, we were able to add this floor, our floor, to the pre-planned 3-story building. Now, this was the interesting part. The investment group had tenants that had pledged interest in the building, but that wasn't good enough for the bank. The bank said, I don't care how many tenants have pledged, I'm not giving you the financing. So what Al and Ralph and Bill Lauer went back out and did was found tenants that would commit to buying a condominium in this building. So it became an office condominium project as opposed to a leasehold property. So with 65% of the space pre-leased as an office condo, the bank said, okay, I'll give you a lease. I'll give you a loan, rather. So that's how we became a condominium building.
So is that a new concept at the time?
It was a very new concept, Ivani, very new, and hardly anybody was doing it. They had a few buildings in DC that had turned condo, but out here I think this might have been like one of the early buildings that did that. And it's interesting because a lot of dentists bought spaces in the building.
Sure.
So we have like
And they're doing very
we all,
well, by the
you know,
way.
you can take your child to the pediatric dentist. We go to the dentist here, and then you can get orthodontics here too. So a lot of dentists ended up buying
There's
in
a
the
lot of
building.
little kids with
But-
smiles and balloons walking out.
Yeah. So it was a, you know, and it's a beautiful site. It's easy in, easy out, and you can get here by metro. So it's just the perfect building. So anyway,
Worked very well.
I think that's. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything.
So
but,
Bill Lauer's
you know,
office was, Roseanne, can you point out the little building next to us
Oh,
where
yeah,
his
sure.
office, actually it's got the dark roof and we've got the white roof. You can see it on the
Yes.
left-hand image on the left-hand side.
Yeah, it's right over here, right now. This one, the little building at the corner, right of the
Actually,
square.
right.
Yeah. But anyway, that's where Bill's office was. But
It worked out well. It's,
yeah, it's
you know, we did, I'm gonna be real honest because I was asked to be, you know, how many people are actually using the rail? And some are, but most aren't. And I think part of that is since COVID, there's just not the traffic on the road as there has been. And especially with all this access with the toll road and so on, it's very quick and very simple to get here. Plus we have more than adequate parking. One of the
Right.
things that's great about the location, though, is you can just run across the street, hop on the rail, and visit a lot of your
Right.
tenants around there. So we do
Right.
probably more of that.
Ridership in most major cities is down.
Right.
Well, so everything changes, right?
Yeah.
Give it 3 years.
Yep. So anyway,
Fuel prices
thank you
are
very
also
much.
down.
Thanks.
Al, you're
Yeah.
going to take over now, right?
As a result of his 48 years of experience in the design profession, Mr. Hansen is not only a master in his field, but also a dedicated community leader and planner. When he left Washington, D.C. in 1987, he opened his own practice in rural but rapidly growing Loudoun County. Alan recognized the need for a community-centric, volunteer-based design organization which would serve the county by offering professional planning guidance and ultimately fostering the creation of sensibly designed, high-functional communities. Since founding the Loudoun County Design Cabinet in 2004, he has given countless hours of service to further the betterment of his community and others. A steadfast commitment he has given, and he was honored with elevation to the fellowship within the American Institute of Architects in 2013. In addition, his experience as a sole proprietor gave him the opportunity to work in several different types of projects and to acquire incisive leadership and business development expertise. This extensive knowledge base and far-reaching versatility are invaluable assets to his work here at DBI. Alan also enjoys being involved in design. You often find him sketching by hand in the studio and seeks to involve himself with projects that offer variety, engagement, and opportunities for creative growth, viewing relationship building as the foundation of business development. And that is the foundation of business development. Alan maintains that the best projects are those that provide clients with skillful and appropriately designed and profitable results. As they now say at the Loudoun County Department of Economic Development, good design is good business. Please welcome Alan Hansen.
Hey, glad you're here. Thanks for coming. I have been given 2 tasks. The first one has to do with Arlington and the time spent there on the Planning Commission, and then moved out there in Loudoun County in 1987, and formed something with then Director of Economic Development Larry Rosenstrauch, who created 3 cabinets at the same time. One was the Design Cabinet, one was Science and Technology, and then the third one was the CEO Cabinet. And the CEO and the Design Cabinet still exist. In fact, we have a design charrette coming up in about 6 weeks with the town of Hamilton. So it's been a long ride. It's been a great ride. It's been a great experience, and I'll talk to you about that when we get to it. But I'm maybe working with the AIA to see if we can make that a national. I think it's good for the architects and the planners in the United States. I think it's also good for the jurisdiction. So we'll spend a little bit of time with Arlington. I'm going to do exactly what I shouldn't do with an audience, but I can't give it to you any better than this information. I actually found this over the weekend. Wasn't even really looking for it. Called the Rosalind Ballston Corridor Early Visions, and it's fascinating. And it's fascinating. One of the reasons is that where we are in the Silver Line and where this was at this time was similar. Although they had a plan for each of the stations, we can get into that because it speaks for itself. But this all started. See, sometimes you're just kind of hanging out at your desk, not necessarily, looking for anything in particular. And this woman calls me, and her name is Ellen Bosman, and I lived in Arlington at the time. I lived there for 15 years, and she says, "Will you have lunch with me?" I'm thinking, is there a purpose? But okay, yes, I'll have lunch with you. So we met in Roslyn, and we had lunch. And boy, did she have some questions. Da-dun, 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 just going down the line. And I didn't quite understand why we had that lunch. A week later, I get a letter. Congratulations, you've been selected for the Arlington County Planning Commission. And I thought, I don't think I was given the opportunity to say yes or no, but that is the absolute truth. That's exactly the way that thing went. So that was Ellen, great lady. She actually has the county administration building named after her, and that's the way it got started. All right, so we talked about the top piece. Actually, there was something called the Ballston Partnership. In other words, every one of these stations, whether it's Herndon or whether it's Ashburn, I don't know about the airport, but there's a partnership, and that indicates what the purpose was. And it was a great opportunity to mix with other citizens, county staff, and so on. But our focus was just the station. It wasn't the line, it was just the station area. And then, of course, what I just told you about with the Arlington County Planning Commission. So let's see here. All right. What I want to do is talk about Arlington first. This actually jumps over to the design cabinet, and there's a reason for those photos. But what I'd like to do, if you all will bear with me, I picked out just a portion of what was stated in this 1989 document to talk about the overall historical context of the Orange Line, and then they go into 5 stations, and you get the flavor of each station. But what I'd like you to do is think about that in relation to the Silver Line and the stations on the Silver Line, all the way from across the street out to past Herndon and so on, and all the way on out to Ashburn. That's what's fascinating. When I first read this, I wasn't making that connection, and I'll share this piece with you. When this was written, the Orange Line went to Roslyn. That was the end of it. They still had to make some decisions about where it went from there. But I'm wondering if what we've done thus far, I'm thinking as someone who lived in Loudoun County for 34 years, if running the rail to Ashburn isn't the same as running the rail to Roslyn. And so what we're really looking for in all these stations, and when you hear about them specifically, you will go, yeah, that's like the next level of specificity. So just think about it. I'm not asking you to agree with me, but it did strike me that this is sort of like putting the anchor out there in the land, and then from there, as the area grows, you're going to decide what has to happen. So, like I say, I'm going to do a little bit of reading. Again, it's not what we're necessarily supposed to be doing, but listen to some of the criteria. And this was written, again, 34 years ago. The beginnings. The concept of a Roslyn-Ballston corridor tied together by Metro emerged in the late 1960s as a result of Arlington County consideration of the optimum alignment of a proposed subway spur through the county's central region. The county ultimately decided against alternate Metro routes along the 66 right-of-way and Columbia Pike in favor of a path along Wilson Boulevard and Fairfax Drive. I didn't know that they had considered those first. It just isn't part of the history. By the time I got there, it was clearly going down Wilson Boulevard and Fairfax Drive. It was hoped that such routing would revive the flagging fortunes of that corridor's significant but aging commercial center. Does this sound like some of the discussion we had for other rail, including the Silver Line? It was also generally assumed that construction of the Metro line would result in significant redevelopment along the alignment. Particularly in light of the explosive growth of Roslyn earlier in the decade. Arlington County's prior experience with Roslyn would be a key factor in determining its hopes and expectations for the new corridor. In the wake of a federal government decision to lease rather than build additional office space for its growing bureaucracy, Roslyn in the early 60s had become the focus of intensive redevelopment. We all know that, right? I mean, the size of the buildings and so on. Arlington County has taken advantage of the trend to pioneer the site plan approval process as a means of promoting public redevelopment objectives through private initiative, which all seems pretty normal now. It's kind of what we do. By the time planning for Metro began in the late 60s, as a result, Roslyn was well on its way to transformation from a tawdry collection of warehouses and service establishments. Does anybody remember any piece of Roslyn? It's hard to imagine that. There was a restaurant we used to go to down there, which was just a one-story building. I'm trying to think of the name of that. But anyway, warehouses in Roslyn, really? To a high-density urban office environment, and the county had acquired considerable experience in managing large-scale redevelopment. Go County. As this had been achieved at no cost to Arlington taxpayers, moreover, the process could be viewed as a major success in terms of planning policy. I guess it's hard to get the picture of an area which was warehousing to what we look at today. But they're going to talk about uses here in a minute, which is fascinating. One more paragraph on the overall view. That success was blurred, however, by what came to be perceived as shortcomings in the way Roslyn had grown. The high-density office buildings which fueled Roslyn's rebirth created an environment which some considered architecturally sterile. The absence of new residential construction discouraged commercial and restaurant development, causing the area to become an urban desert at night. Have we heard that one before? A lack of open spaces and street-level retail facilities, combined with the uncoordinated development of pedestrian vehicular circulation systems, added to Roslyn's user-hostile image. How about that? Roslyn we don't have anybody here from the Arlington County Department of Economic Development. Finally, speculation that neighborhoods surrounding the Roslyn Plan area would themselves become high-density development targets led to their deterioration. When these negative facets of Roslyn's redevelopment became the focus of press and community attention, Roslyn became a symbol of what Arlington residents did not want to happen in or near their own neighborhoods. And I'm going to talk to you as we take a quick walk through these different stations. That was one of the things that became very evident in again, being a planning commissioner, and then I was there when they formed the Site Plan Review Committee, which is you had to take your drawings to Site Plan Review Committee before you go to the Planning Commission. The problem is a lot of people learned how that worked, sitting down and helping people with their site plans, and they'd come in with 3 lines on a piece of tracing paper. Could you help us with this? And the next thing you know, they realize that if we're all sketching with them and developing plans, well, okay, it's going to be approved by the Planning Commission. So it was a real, politics was very, very interesting. Anybody they want to, anything they want to input in the development of Roslyn? It's always been kind of a fascination to me with, views that you have and don't have, and roadways that you may work and they may not.
I like the tawdry warehouse.
I know.
Are all warehouses tawdry?
Was that Orleans Steakhouse? Was that the name?
Orleans Steakhouse. Yeah, it was Orleans. What was the guy's name that went with that?
Tom Saris.
Ruth Cripp?
Yeah.
Tom Saris's
Orleans
steak. The
house.
food was great.
The other one was Beefsteak Charlie's.
Oh, okay, you say Charlie's like that.
That's probably what Ellen Bosman asked me to be a planning commissioner, but didn't tell me about it. All right. Let's take us, okay. All right. Let's talk about, I'm sorry, I lied to you. We're not quite to a station yet. This is still a little bit about Roslyn. The RBCC, Rosalind Ballston Corridor Commission. Let's see. The committee was adamant that the Rosalind experience should not be repeated in the corridor. While Arlington can live with a Rosalind or on its periphery, we have a development of that size in an interior location, such as one of the metro stations in the RB corridor, would have a devastating impact on adjacent residential communities. So the way that this thing worked is that I don't know if Arlington came up with this or not, but it was the quarter-mile rule. So you got the station and you go out 1,320 feet around it, and that's higher density because people can pretty easily walk there. And now there's kind of an extension of that that goes up to the half-mile radius. And if you have spent much time in those Arlington neighborhoods, a lot of it is still, created in World War II vintage, a little before and a lot after. I had a home that was a post like 1946. Pomponio was the builder. One story, I don't know, 40 by 40, 50 by 50. Garage in the back, 2 little strips of concrete, that would go back to it. And they were concerned that these are going to be overwhelmed by the development around the rail stations. So if you can picture the thing terracing down within that first quarter mile, that's your high density. And we're talking densities. When I left there, when I moved to Loudoun County, we're talking about Ballston and Clarendon of a 6.5 FAR. For those of you that don't know what FAR, floor area ratio, you have a site that's 100,000 square feet. If they allow a FAR of 6, then the building could be 600,000 square feet, or a 6.5, 650,000 square feet. These were enormous structures. I mean, it took my breath away. Here, a couple other things that I thought were fascinating. We talked about the retail, also open space, and this is something to think about with Silverline. The committee attached particular importance to the provision within the corridor of adequate park and open space, recommending, now get ready for this, recommending that not less than 75 acres acquired for the corridor as a whole, be acquired for the whole, with a minimum of 5 acres of park open space in each bullseye. So the bullseye is you go out quarter mile, you go all the way around, that's a bullseye. That's the very center of it. So fascinating stuff. I was really pretty impressed that even back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that they were thinking pretty clearly. All right, let's try a little bit of, now this is, okay, so now it's the 5 stations, and we've got a couple of paragraphs on each one. So here's Rosalind. For purpose of county planning, and I didn't know this, I don't know who does, there were 2 Rosalinds in what would become the current station area. Anybody know what they are? I didn't either. That covered by the original 1962 Rosalind Development Plan, and the peripheral area west and south of the central core, comprising a mix of existing residential and commercial uses. So you could see that even then they were concerned about making sure that you're mixing up your uses. And they have a couple of stations here where they want them heavily leaning one way or another, which I found fascinating. It says, planning for Rosalind's neglected periphery sought to balance the high-density office commercial growth in the station's core area by expansion of residential usage and improving the viability of established single-family and garden apartment communities. So you see what they were doing? That you had the single-family homes. I don't think after World War II there's a whole lot of townhouses. 4 I think it came later, probably in the 70s. But they had garden apartment. In fact, one of them they mentioned is Colonial Terrace. And I don't know if I can say I've walked it, or a few of those we've worked on over the years. But they were very concerned that this neighborhood would be preserved. They didn't want to see Colonial Terrace be wiped out. So there's the thinking on Roslyn. How is that lined up with your thinking, or how is it different than your thinking, or what you feel about Roslyn and the years that you've been around it?
I've only ever gone through Roslyn on the train.
You never got out in the streets of, man.
Try and
It's still
find
not
it.
easy to walk around, I don't think, in Roslyn. It's still kind of a pedestrian nightmare.
Because, go into that a little bit.
Well, I
What?
think just because of the density of the office buildings and, the streets are just ziggy and it's just not I don't know, it just doesn't seem very pedestrian friendly to me.
But haven't they,
Yeah, right, and you have all the grade changes, which are huge, right? Yeah.
Yes.
but haven't they done stuff recently in Roslyn to
I think they're,
make
they're
it
definitely
more,
working on it,
more,
yeah, to make it more pedestrian friendly.
more pedestrian friendly?
Yeah.
Question?
Do you know when that pedestrian bridge was added?
Good
Over
question.
66?
Good question.
Well, like I say, I left
Is
and
that-
went to Loudoun County. I used to go down. I used to see it every day driving, underneath it. I don't know. Who knows? Who in this group knows? How about the decade?
I think from my perspective, the walkability of Roslyn, because I have a friend who lives in the building where top of the town is,
Yeah.
and we can walk to, Iwo Jima, we can walk into the side of Arlington, you can
Uh-huh.
walk to the metro, and you can walk to all that,
Oh,
sort of, I guess, is that south of 66, that
Yeah,
part of
that,
Roslyn.
that quadrant right there, you're right, that quadrant is
And
very
there's some of
walkable.
those, I feel like garden apartment
Yeah,
type
there's garden
in,
apartments in there.
when I walked in his neighborhood.
Yeah.
That
That-
section, but
that
not
section is
all
nice.
of Roslyn, like
Yes.
definitely on the other side of
Yeah.
66, it's more
Right. I was
high
thinking-
density, but I feel like that area is, I don't know how old those buildings are, but they're definitely unique, like his elevator has a 5 and an 8,
Uh-huh.
because they're stacked condos.
Yeah, right.
So I'm
right.
like, what floor am I going to? Right, because they're like,
Yeah,
but that section at least is pretty walkable, but it's not new.
yeah, that's the very old part, I think, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that when they finally got some momentum with this, is if you look at those station areas, again, you got the quarter mile, so you got a half a mile, highest density. The next level is the multifamily. The next level is the townhouses, and they put a hard line between those townhouses and those one-story houses. They did not want any of that density leaking out into those houses of Arlington's heritage, from, again, pre-World War II and in World War II. I mean, I must have heard it over and over and over again. You will not take, I'll trade you this, we can do this, because this is green space, and so they weren't
Were they a
going out
powerful
there.
voting bloc that they didn't want to
Yeah.
irritate?
Yeah, right. All right, let's talk just a little bit about courthouse. It says the thrust of the sector plan released in 1980. Now, I came in I think, 83. So this is already going on. Was to promote intensive redevelopment of the area's central core while preserving communities and established uses in the surrounding areas. Okay, they're consistent. It says the focal point of the area would be a zone immediately surrounding the metro and government center, visually unified by a series of plazas, and you think your way through walking around in Arlington, and common architectural treatments, the whole designed to emphasize integrity and public accessibility. Now, as you think about that, think about the Silver Line and what we've talked about and not talked about, so play that up in your mind. Options for expansion of county offices and for establishment of public parking facilities were to be preserved in the area immediately to the west of the courthouse. Property swaps would consolidate the property immediately to the east of the courthouse tower in county hands, preserving a vista, is good, of the Washington Monument and the Capitol. So they were thinking through that. Pretty impressive, I thought. Within the station area as a whole, 4,000 new residential units were expected to be constructed, along with 3 million square feet of new office commercial space, the highest targets for either category anywhere in the corridor. 3 million square feet of office in the commercial that's a big number today. I mean, that was really out there. Okay, now one of my favorites. Who likes Clarendon? I always liked Clarendon, the old Clarendon, the shops and so on. In fact, I was around Arlington long enough that I remember the old J.C. Penney's. So going with my friends to shop for T-shirts. All right, let's talk a little bit about Clarendon. Of all station areas, Clarendon was the most intensely studied and most hotly debated. Hotly debated, if I had to have 2 words for being a planning commissioner in Arlington, I mean, I didn't even bother trying to debate anything at home. I was debated out. And most of the time I was just observing. I mean, I wasn't in the middle of the debate. You and you. And what was interesting is the people of Arlington, I don't see it so much out in Loudoun County and so on, but one of the things that they would say over and over is, I got my doctorate at GW. I got my master's here. Don't tell me what to think. So they were, it was high intensity. All right. Here, the collision of visions, collision's a great name for it, of visions inherent throughout the corridor was most acute, fueled on the one hand by active and well-organized neighborhoods committed to reviving a historic small-town atmosphere. Think about that. I want to commit to reviving a historic small-town atmosphere. And by the way, here's this thing called the Orange Line, and we're going to try to run all that together. And tempered, on the other hand, by the reality that only a significant influx of new investment would reverse the area's long slide. So Clarendon was in a long slide. I guess I can vaguely remember. I mean, I came here when I was 17. I guess some of the shops. All right. Studies of Clarendon by county and citizens groups in the 60s had reached a consensus on the imperative of preserving Clarendon's residential neighborhoods and on the consequent importance of ensuring adequate transition between those neighborhoods and any new development. Coming up with a strategy. Remember I told you, you have the one-story houses, and when you start the townhouses, be real careful. You don't move, you don't expand 1 inch. Coming up with a strategy for achieving these goals proved most elusive, particularly in view of the fact that existing zoning in the station core provided for high-density development as a matter of right, which it did. I told you about the big FARs. As the debate continued into the early 80s, neighborhood concerns over the impact of increased density, height, and traffic as a result of redevelopment of Clarendon's core tended to become more, not less, acute. And then just a few more notes about Clarendon. I have a little more on this than I do in the others because I just was in love with the old neighborhoods. The long-delayed 1984 Clarendon sector plan sought to reconcile these conflicting viewpoints in the concept of an urban village. So keep that in mind. People still like to play that name. A central open space around the metro station with the new high-rise Olmsted building. Anybody remember the Olmsted building? You get the dealership, the auto dealership, and then next to it, the high-rise, as a focal point. Oh, listen to this. With the new high-rise Olmsted building as a focal point recalling the cathedrals of European villages. I mean, I lived there when that building was built. That didn't strike me that it was a cathedral.
Sounds good to keep it small.
Height limits in the immediate surrounding commercial redevelopment district aimed at providing a rapid, here we go again, tapering down of height and density. A surrounding medium density mixed-use zone designed to reconcile existing commercial rights with the need to buffer established neighborhoods. In all, the sector plan projected the development of, now, here we go, 8,000 to 12,000 new residential units just at Clarendon, 3 million square feet, I heard that before, of new office commercial floor space. Dennis, question for you, Herndon. that kind of, there's almost a fear woven into this that the higher density may be of some detriment to the existing residents and so on. I mean, you getting that kind of passion in Herndon?
No. I mean, because it's only on the other side of the south side of Herndon Parkway, so I mean that plan's been passed, the H-Dock now. On the north side, they're doing the TRG area, and that's
You want to
still
tell
being
people
studied right
what
now.
TRG, in
So,
case they don't know?
Transit-related growth area. It's on the north side of Herndon Parkway. And it will include Sunset Business Park, Victory Drive, and so that plan's underway right now. So, and that will be determined, the densities hasn't been determined yet. But it'll certainly be tapering down to the residential behind it, the single family.
Yeah. Speaking of tapering down, the last note on that station is townhouse developments and open spaces would be used to insulate existing neighborhoods from higher density uses. From all those big bad tax generating higher density. Yes,
When was this written?
89.
So 10 years after all these stations opened.
Yeah, but one of the things we learned in that process is not much happened at those stations for the first 3 years. Not much at all happened.
Right.
And then after we got past the
And then the
first...
other stations like Dunmore and stuff hadn't opened yet.
Oh, no. No. Weren't there. It only went out to Ballston. So this is just Orange Line, just to Ballston. That's it. 5 stations. All right, let's take a shot at Virginia Square, which I could never quite figure out what it was. Is it commercial? Is it resident? It was, honestly, sorry if you all worked on Virginia Square, but it wasn't my favorite. But anyway, here we go. The Virginia Square station, labeled Ballston in early planning studies, was initially conceived as a primarily residential environment. It was only one of the corridor's 5 stations identified as meeting the county long-range improvement program's call for preserving the option of keeping at least one station area as primarily residential in character. Isn't that interesting? We always think that the answer to the uses at all these stations is mixed use. I mean, I'm kind of wired that way. You kind of wired that way? Mixed use is better than a single use? Yeah. Let's see here. Residential character. Early official and unofficial studies saw it primarily as a buffer between relatively high-density uses at the Clarendon and Glebe, later Ballston stations, with medium-density residential development in the area's fragmented central sector, the primary focus of new growth. One more paragraph, I think, on Virginia Square. Yep. These assumptions changed in the early 80s. This is your timing process with the this is good. You'll like this. With the acquisition by George Mason University for an Arlington campus of the former Conn's site. Conn's was a department store. George Mason came in. They're wonderful, but everybody knows it as George Mason and only that now. Given its proximity in the Virginia Square station area to the county library, Central Park, and Arts Center, the GMU decision created the opportunity to develop a significant cultural, educational, recreational center at the heart of the county. Such a vision, while not necessarily at odds with the concept of an essentially residential community environment, became controversial. Listen to this. When GMU sought to develop land used by the only grocery in the station area for parking. And I used to drive up there from my house and park. That was, I think, Giant. And I used to park in their shopping center, walk across the street and hop on the Virginia Square Metro. So there you have it.
I think it's interesting they use the word heart there, because that's what they were trying to build, right? You know, with the residents and the people surrounded by commerce.
I mean, I'm impressed with what I'm impressed by really the depth of the urban planning. I don't even know where all this came from. I don't recall that. I don't know if that was National ULI or what, but Arlington was still one of the first areas in the country that got these stations with these bullseye of the high density stepping in. At least I think that's right. Of course, when you're in Arlington and you're a planning commission, they tell you, oh, you guys are great because, you know, this is happening. It may be happening in other places. I just didn't bother to look. All right. Ballston. Last one. With the possible exception of courthouse, the county's vision of what the Ballston area could become was from the start the clearest of any of the 5 stations. Who would have known that? Does it feel that way today? The western terminus of the corridor, served by major regional roadways, including after 1979 by I-66, with an existing major retail center, Parkington. Ballston was initially called Glebe. There it was called Glebe. So there you go. Was envisioned as a gateway to the corridor as a whole and as its commercial center of gravity. The presence of established neighborhoods to the north and south of the new metro station, however, were important parameters on the character and density of new growth. And here we go again. Buffering of established single-family neighborhoods through promotion of townhouse construction in areas adjacent to higher density areas. And that's exactly the way it worked. And man, you better not vary from that at all. There's a whole section which I'm not going to read to you. Maybe we can copy this, anybody wants to take a look at it. But it's called Unresolved Issues. And yes, they were absolutely unresolved. And then I want to get on to the last subject quickly, which is Loudoun County. Again, went out 87, Larry Rosenstrauch in 2004 asked that we start this cabinet, and so we decided right from the start that it would only be people who lived in the county or worked in the county that could be involved. Otherwise, you just don't have the passion for it. So we really started it for one reason, and that was to have a annual Signatures of Loudoun. I don't remember who came up with that, but I thought it was a brilliant name. Awards competition. And I was used to that kind of stuff through the American Institute of Architects. And so we had the design awards the first year. I think we had 25 entries, and we gave 5 awards. These posters are still around. We might even have one in our conference room. And what you're seeing here in the upper left-hand corner is later on we invited high school students to be part of this and help make selections. There might even have been a student winner, and that was really, really well received. So that's been going on since about 20 years, almost 20 years, since 2004. We do those in the fall. People are still submitting projects. Of course, they tapered off when we had the downturn. When the downturns come, the number of projects again turned down. Who knows Kate McGinnis Wyatt? How about the the Marshall home in Leesburg? I don't think we were together 2 months, 3 months, and she came in and said, "Oh, you're a design cabinet. Will you help us?" And I asked Larry. I said, "Larry, we put this thing together for this design awards competition," and he said, "Do you know how to do that?" I said, "Yeah. I mean, we do it in our work. It's called a design charrette." By the way, who knows what the word charrette means? Okay, so a charrette is a French word which means cart. And so what would happen is the kids in the École de Beaux-Arts, they understand they did all their work in one building, but they showed all their work up on a slide hill at a exhibit hall. And so they got on the charrette, on the cart, with their boards and their markers and their pencils and all whatever, and they're drawing as fast as they can in the cart as it goes up the hill to show it. So my whole career, we've been, and we still do charrettes currently. We have those coming up. In fact, that's going to be the town of Hamilton. We will do a charrette in August. And oh man, the people involved in that, I'm not sure.
A little history for those of you in Herndon. Herndon did a charrette. back around 2000, 2001.
I was there.
Really? And it was planning?
Hmm?
Yeah.
The downtown,
Yep.
how to define it, what should be in it, where are the borders.
That's the way it's got to be done. And it's a great format when you get people together, just give them markers and let them sketch. And people that know what they're talking about or at least know the area. So this is an example of, in this case, it was up by George Washington University, what might happen in the area, how the land uses may occur, and that's kind of what it looks like there on the right-hand side, although that picture wasn't taken yesterday because there's somebody there with a tie and at the design table yet, which you don't see much of. So anyway, great experience. We had people from the school, people from the county, the cabinet together, and when it's all said and done, the county packages it up in online or in booklets, and again, it's been helpful. There's been zoning codes and comprehensive plans changed because of the work of these charrettes. And so now to put the whole thing together, we had several, in fact you might, if you can, read that on the left-hand side, we can get this printed, but we actually brought in the cabinet to work on Silver Line. This is 2009. They didn't approve the thing until 2012, so 3 more years after this. So when we finished the work, I think it says, let's see, Washington Dulles International Airport stations in Loudoun County. These proposals were well received and are currently in development. Well, that's what happens in a long-term project. So, that's kind of the picture of the oh, and I'll give you one more piece of it too. I'm starting to talk with the National AIA, which is in Washington, about taking the design cabinet concept national because it benefits everyone. It benefits the firms. They get to know people in and around these jurisdictions, and you get calls years later, hey, can you come out and look at something you guys looked at it 6 years ago or 2 years ago, and would you come out and you want to go ahead and do something? And it also benefits the jurisdictions. I was told, who knows Martha Mason Sims? She is a planner, and she told me this very morning that the town of Hamilton's having a hard time getting any money to do much upgrades, public upgrades, landscaping and walks and so on, because they didn't put a plan together. So I made sure that initially it was more architects than anything else and planners, but later on brought in the landscape architects, even civil engineer a couple times, artists, depending on what we were doing. In fact, I think this said that the cabinet proposed that graphics and artwork commissioned by local Loudoun artists be used for wayfinding and interior enhancements so that passengers know when they have passed through neighboring Fairfax County and the Washington Dulles International Airport stations in Loudoun County. I'm thinking, that was a good idea. Why haven't we done that? Because the point was to give you a sense of place once you've landed, and we have a system that's built as a system. I mean, one station sort of looks like the next, but why isn't it finished in the local color? So that's the next thing you can do, is go argue with your jurisdiction about, it's like Herndon. We got a call. You remember the tower? I guess it's now gone, but Herndon is named after Captain Herndon, who drowned. He was piloting a ship, but 159 people were saved by him losing his life, and they wanted to build a tower that looked out over Dulles Airport, call it the Herndon Tower. They got a little nervous when they said, well, if you're going to, and I said, go up on that tower and look out, not just look at the tower? Yeah, well, you're gonna need stair, and if you have one stair, you're gonna need two stairs, and then probably an elevator if it's, 100 feet tall or whatever. Then you gotta park the cars and you have to some bathrooms. Ooh, this project just got to be a lot bigger, so right now it's kind of quiet. And that's really what I wanted to share with you. What I want you to think about is the silver line, the orange line. They have very specific concepts for these stations, but think going west from here. This is okay. It's a metro station. Reston, yeah, metro station tied to high density. All that makes sense. Go out to innovation. That will be, the line between the counties. But it's not like Virginia Square and Clarendon and so on, where you just keep going and you tie all those together, because the next one's airport, and the next one's primarily parking, right, along with some data centers. So here's the thought, and I'll leave you with this, and you can sketch tonight on your napkins when you're having dinner. Is I wonder if the last station on the line.
Ashburn.
I'm a morning person. Ashburn. I start running out of gas. So the Ashburn station, is that Roslyn? Is that where the line reached out and then dropped? And in the next generation or two behind us, they'll start figuring out, the orange line and how this connects to that. And you think about the historic Clarendon and the historic Leesburg. No, we don't want to look at the rail running through Leesburg, but there's some great history for people. Does eventually it go out to some of the wineries and the breweries out in the western side of the county? What about One Loudon? Great place. I live in countryside. I take family over to One Loudon. Wow, they think they're in Reston Town Center. Banners and signage, and so there's a lot to think about. And I just keep wondering if those two stations are actually similar to one another. So it's kind of hard to put together Arlington and Loudon, and I'm sure it was fairly disconnected, but there's some things to think about.
Has Arlington been successful in maintaining that division between the old houses and the new buildings coming up, or is there some encroachment going on, or who's guarding the residents?
Can somebody answer that more authoritatively than me? I think so. I think they have,
The
but
biggest challenge they have is people are tearing down the old homes and putting the mansions up. That's the biggest challenge they have.
From within. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Large
they're
homes.
playing on the edge of
They're
the
right on
property,
the
and
edge.
instead of having some land around them. So yeah, I see.
Right.
They're getting rid of all the affordable housing as well.
although I think the county has done a pretty good job with what's the group, Arlington Affordable, it's the Affordable Housing Group. I want to get to know them a little bit better, because we do some of that. Yeah. I'm sorry,
Well,
Roseanne.
What I see, along Wilson Boulevard is the beautiful homes, which are becoming mixed mansioned, obviously, and then you have a nice buffer of 3 to 5 story multifamily buildings, and then you have the high rises. So I think it's a nice transition, and I think they've done that really well.
Seems like
what
with
a
this,
single-family house looked like has changed.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah.
it seems like, again, I'm a marketer, I have to.
We're marketers.
If you use an acronym, I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. It seems like, and I don't know if it was because it took so long for Silverline to actually get completed. It just seems like the towns have all, and jurisdictions have all thought about or maybe because it was less populated as they went through, well, probably not, but have thought about what that looks like. Because certainly with our Metro Mondays, we've seen what all the development, I mean, sometimes they change names and change people who are doing the development, but over the past few years, we've seen what all the developments are going to look like, right?
Well, I think we need to look hard at Arlington and really study it. In fact, maybe that's a follow-on. We ought to do that. I think we need to learn from that, because that started in 60, so that's 60 years of development. There's a lot to learn from that. I'm not saying it's all exactly the same out here on the Silver Line, but humans are humans, and so that's what it is. I'm sorry.
But I suggest to you that the answer to this is political, not planning concepts. It's a political concept.
And the concept is if you take off the whole community, you're not gonna get this thing built at all. So how do you deal with folks who insist that they live in a single-family home? You accommodate them by having single-family homes. At the same time, however, you can then go central and go with higher densities and different housing styles. So if you try to talk about mowing all these houses down and building them all up in the air, it ain't gonna happen. Because the folks, the Ellen Bosmans of the world, who was herself a genius in terms of doing this, of putting together the politics of keeping the community together and having this happen. The reason why I think you see what you're seeing in the Silver Line situation is because of what happened in Arlington. When we were in the early stages of trying to get the Silver Line approved, we always used it as an example. Well, in Arlington, and you can talk about then how that evolved. Well, it's going to be all density. Well, in Arlington, it hasn't happened. So I'm saying, so that really, and my concept of, or my understanding of this, and it may not be correct, is that internationally, or certainly nationally, the Arlington model of doing this is still in high esteem. Smart growth it's called. How do you deal with the fact that you want density? You also deal with the fact that a whole lot of people don't want density. I wouldn't mind living in an urban home, I think, but right now I actually enjoy my single family home. And if you talked about taking them all down, I'd be really opposed to that kind of thing. But if you continue to keep people off the roads, and you know what's happening at Wheeling and so on, if you keep people off the roads, but have them live there, and go take the elevators down to the train, now that's smooth transportation. You get out there anyway. So some of these are broad planning concepts, but they're based in political reality, I think, because all these concepts are only good to the degree that you can get the political establishment to agree with the planning process. So anyway, that's where I come from.
Dennis, what's your thoughts there based on what you saw in Arlington? Is there anything that sort of either rang your bell positively or negatively?
No, I mean,
with Herndon?
Oh, compared to Herndon?
Yeah, that's what I'm, the underlying, it's all George's fault. Because I thought we were just going to talk about the Silver Line and then the design cabinet, anything we did together. But she says, you know, you were on the planning commission, so in Arlington, talk about this Orange Line and talk about the Silver Line. And that, dare I tell you, I woke up at 4 this morning. My mind was going 100 miles an hour about Roslyn and the relationship between the two lines, even this many years later. There's some truths, like you say, that just don't change.
Well, people don't like change.
No, they don't.
This is my life. I want it to stay this way. Not in my backyard.
A major hurdle in getting the Silver Line approved was the town of Herndon. The town took the position that essentially they weren't getting anything out of it, and how could they be accommodated in the process? And we had former governors,
Chuck Robb
Tim
and
Holton
Holton.
and Chuck Robb, trying to put pressure on the town. Well, ultimately, what happened, I think, that got that resolved was an understanding that if you look at the Arlington model, you can see you can keep your single-family homes, and you can make plans for the higher density, and you can have them both. And ultimately, by a squeaker, we got by Loudon, and then we got by Herndon, and then the next hurdle was Loudon.
So what year was
big
that?
one.
What year was that?
Well, I don't know.
Trying to remember. Sorry. Eileen, I'm sure.
But the Loudon challenge has nothing to do with Metro as much as
2003.
Western Loudon, Eastern Loudon.
Oh, that's a whole different.
That's a whole, when you're talking about density.
Well, we ain't gonna be able to train through Western Loudon.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
I have to say that, Ken, you should talk a little bit about the Dulles Corridor Rail Association, because it was 10 years of constant effort to keep everyone engaged in rail to Dulles and beyond. Am I correct? I mean, you pulled together so many different sectors of our community.
Well, what we had was planners and other people talking about that we need some kind of mass transit, we need a balanced transportation system. that we couldn't get the political leadership to agree that we would really go to mass transit with an extension of Dulles, of rail in the Dulles corridor. So we worked with any kind of group that we could get, and not surprisingly, the developer group was the first to join us, because they had some to gain from how that land was used and how you access the land with transit. And then, interestingly enough, and to my delight, when we did a group called Rail Now, it was like 25 groups, and it included things like cornerstones, who also were interested in having mass transit because it allowed you to send people out to work, and for like Dulles Airport, it meant a way to get people into work. So it solved an employment problem in a big way. And when you talk about affordable housing, with the smart growth concept, you could utilize different modes of housing so that you could get high-rise and you could get townhouses and so on, because they fit in a more of an affordable range. So it only took us from 1989 till Silver Line opened in
November.
No, it opened in 2
2014.
phases. Yeah,
Was
2
the
phases.
first
Oh,
phase.
yeah, I'm talking about the first phase,
2014.
2014. So actually, we did it pretty good, 1989 to 2014. That wasn't bad. Because there was incredible opposition to it, and the Secretary of Transportation under the Bush administration announced the project would not be funded. Period.
Mary.
Hmm?
Her name was Mary.
Pierce. I don't know. But anyway, the governor, Tim Kaine at the time, who really was an advocate for the project, in part because he was a smart man and understood the value of the project, but also in light of the fact that the major developer in Tyson's Corner was also very heavily politically involved. And so those interests came together with Jerry Halpin at Tyson's Corner. And so when the secretary announced that, the governor got in his car in Richmond and made it to DC that same day. Got an appointment with her, and then she didn't change her mind. That's pretty astounding. But I will tell you, somebody needs to go back and do a clipping of the Washington Post. The number of times it was
Put the
announced
story together.
that the Silver Line was dead. And I'm more familiar with the Silver Line, but I think you had the same thing going on initially in Arlington. And it was the wisdom of what was involved in these, most related, called these charrettes, but these heavy involvement with the total community. And the Dulles Corridor Rail Association came about because I represented Ruston in the state legislature, and my constituents kept saying, "What are you going to do about transportation?" So, since we couldn't get any money for roads, we didn't have any. So let's go to the federal government so we can get something by way of train. And then we finally do it. Took an odd combination of public monies and private monies to create the funding. And once the momentum got going and people came to recognize it as a possibility, it was incredibly exciting to have people come to the table, both as individual business people and as state and local government.
And also when you locate it, people understand where it is and where it isn't, that they're nervous or concerned or scared. And they go, wait a minute, I'm over here, that rail runs right up the toll road. So it's to understand what it is, I think.
There's also the concept of you go over or under.
Oh, God.
And Tyson's Corner, of course, we had a situation where the original plan said that it would go over. And Jerry Halpin, the developer at Tyson's Corner, said, that should go under. And so the developer, Tim Kaine, said, well, let's stop the process and take a look at that. And so we stopped the process, took a look at it and said, that may be a good idea, but it costs a whole lot of money, a whole lot of money to do that. And so the only place it went under was on the top of the hill at Tyson's Corner, the hill at Tyson's Corner. And to get over that hill, you'd have to build an awful big bridge to get up to it if you didn't go under. And so we brought some Austrian miners over to show us how to drill a tunnel
Oh, gee.
through soft dirt. You know, building a tunnel, building a tunnel through rock is actually easy. But when you're dealing with soft dirt, and that was an engineering feat to watch.
I think you need to write the book.
Yeah.
Great stories.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know we have a small crowd today, but we have a quality crowd, and it's important because we really need to think about our history and how we got here, and not forget what it took. I read an article from Hal Launders that he had in his memoirs, and it said rail to Dulles in 72, believe it or not, 1972. So it's been going on for a long time, and we're very lucky. And I'd like to, if I may, read something we'd like to get to Divya and Roseanne, if you could come here, please. The Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce and its Board of Directors and membership proudly honors and awards DBI Architect Sinks with the Certificate of Excellence on June 26, 2023, for your unwavering dedication and commitment to the Dulles Corridor communities and the successful completion of the Silver Line. Please.
Wow.
From the very beginning, the strength of the organization was volunteers who were giving their time and energy to make the airport all that it could be.
For 55 years, we've been advocates for transportation infrastructure for the airport and the region.
I have an article that's in the memoirs of Hal Launders, and it says rail to Dulles in 72, believe it or not. Look how long it's taken.
It wasn't just the federal funds that were involved, local funds had to be involved. So it was a question of how was Fairfax and eventually Loudon going to pay their share.
The landowners around Tyson's Corner finally realized that they needed rail through Tyson's.
And they came up with a special tax district for all the businesses that owned property along where the rail was going to be.
That concept went on to phase 2 of Dulles Rail with the Dulles Corridor tax district.
We worked with other organizations to encourage continued support from the business community and the state of Virginia in their participation.
We spent time in Richmond lobbying for what we were trying to accomplish. We did position papers on local and statewide issues and testified before local and state agencies and the legislature.
Going down to Congress and meeting with congressmen and women down there to try to make sure that they heard our voices and knew how important this was.
The Committee for Dulles has become an important part of the community. Elected officials rely on us, the public relies on us. We're able to see issues and educate people about land use decisions, economic development, and other growth potentials for the airport, which are going to benefit all of us.
Well, it's been a terrifically consistent in its advocacy over time, supporting both the airport, rail access, road access to the airport, the growth of cargo traffic, and the growth of passenger traffic.
During my term, they were just beginning or just in the middle of construction for the phase 1 of the interchange project on Route 28. That's something to celebrate. We worked on that for years. Now that project is complete.
We worked very closely with the Smithsonian to try to do whatever we could to ensure that the Air and Space Museum become located in the Dulles Corridor.
The official announcement of the building of the Air and Space Museum was done in May of 1999 by Admiral Ingen, the head of the Air and Space Museum, and he did it at a Committee for Dulles luncheon. In fact, there was someone that was in attendance when it was over that donated $1 million to to the Air and Space Museum that day.
We have maintained or gained international recognition from markets outside of our country. Most famously is the Frankfurt Airport.
We met with teams from Geneva, Switzerland, who wanted to know how a community organization can help the airport. We also met with teams from Paris, France, about how to connect two airports and citizen engagement and public advocacy to the benefit of the economic development of a nation's capital's airports.
When you look at the airport itself, it's tough to think about 12,000 acres as having a sense of community. It's an awful large area. It's a huge amount of land area, infrastructure, employees, but every event that is held either by the authority, by the airport, or through the committee events, you really get a sense of pride and contribution to the community.
Our events are there to promote and foster the growth of Dulles Airport and to keep the communities aware and educate them on the future economic development of the airport and its environs.
If it's a luncheon, or if it's a gala, or if it's another event, you'll have a significant representation of the various industries in our region, and it gives us an opportunity to share not only what we do, but how we can help them.
I asked the question, is there any way we could leverage this group to help the community? And that's when the Committee for Dulles Community Outreach was born.
Number one priority would be to give scholarships to deserving high school seniors.
Every year we give 15, 20 plus scholarships to students, all who are connected to Dulles Airport.
And then we also supported the Interfaith Chapel and the Traveler's Aid organizations at the airport.
100% of the money that the outreach committee raises goes back to the community.
Whether it's the Community Outreach Scholarship Fund, or the run on the runway, or the plane pool, you really get a sense that this is a tight community that supports itself.
The relevance of the Committee for Dulles is more important today than ever because of the growth in international business and the growth in data centers in this area. We have become an even bigger economic engine, and not just the airport, but the services that are around the airport and all of the national and international companies that have headquartered here.
Okay, here we are. We've accomplished so much. What is it that we want to accomplish working with the airport? How do we move forward as a partner with the airport?
The pandemic, in my mind, forced us to be more creative, forced us to be more innovative, and to move forward with the way that we touched the community.
Obviously, with the pandemic over the last years, there's been some erosion in passenger loads, passenger frequency, flights, and what have you. So there's the opportunity to try to continue the path upward to the ultimate capacity of the airport, which I'm told is in the range of 55 million passengers per year.
And as you have more planes, it can impact residential areas to a greater extent. So we are a strong supporter of making sure that our local communities do not enact land use decisions that put people in the flight path of oncoming or departing airplanes. That's something that we try to work on, as well as the ground transportation for access to and from the airport beyond rail.
We still see a continuing role for Committee for Dulles, someone who's looking at the airport and always trying to think, how can this get better? How can we improve Dulles to become part of an even bigger part of the Washington economy?
My expectation is the Committee for Dulles will go on for many years to come.
My father just wasn't as sharp as he used to be. He seemed not to be part of our conversations. He was more forgetful. He seemed sometimes disoriented. He was repetitive. So was it depression? Was it normal aging? Was it hearing loss? Was it everything?
We see people from, young adulthood all the way into their 90s, but we do see a lot of people who are worried about their memory and are starting to experience some memory problems, so they come to us so that we can help clarify whether this is just normal aging or a little bit of stress, or is it something more serious and something that needs some treatment.
And months later, things weren't any different. In fact, they were worse. We were seeing those behaviors more frequently. So my mother called the doctor, and the family doctor had a discussion with him, and the word dementia came up.
Yeah, that's a tough time when you're trying to figure out what's going on and feeling very alone, and it's been really good for me to be able to have the Insight Memory Care Center as a place to refer people for that kind of support. It's a very comprehensive program, I've thought, that can provide the education and make people feel less alone, and then the people to interact with, to talk to, and then also all the resources you have for the professionals that they might need in their lives at that particular time.
And we went online and looked at the whole website, and we found your educational classes, and the one that popped up was the first class that was happening in the beginning of this year, and it was, is forgetfulness a problem? So we read the description, and the first thing it said, is it normal aging or is it dementia? So we continued to read, and then it talked about the differences of the different forms of dementia, and then it was also going to talk about when you need to get help.
What we always try to do is start from the beginning. As we have new caregivers hearing about Insight, we want to make sure that we are starting with that initial diagnosis, carrying them all the way through.
So my sister and I registered. We went to the class. It was excellent. It was in layman's terms. We were with other people who were at the same phase we were. And we walked out, we called our mom back in Pennsylvania and said, you need to schedule an appointment with a neurologist.
I would hope for people that they could find Insight early in the process, as early as possible, and then have that support all the way through.
But if it wasn't for here, I think we'd still be wondering what was the next step we needed to do once we received the diagnosis.
And our education classes are free for the public. You don't have to be enrolled in Insight to be able to attend one of the classes. You can attend all the classes, and some caregivers do. They just want that knowledge.
The educational programs are so helpful. They serve so many needs, not just in terms of providing like the latest cutting edge research or professionals in the field getting the opportunity to share their knowledge with people that it really affects. But it also just gets people together and gets them talking and asking questions, and so they feel more part of a community that's there for them, and it's just an amazing resource.
They have a community of people that they can turn to who are going through the same thing, that can really understand what they're going through.
Learn as much as you can. Become friends with the people who come here on a monthly basis. They do become your support group as well. We laugh, we cry, we talk about our wins and our losses, but most of all, we all comfort each other. But finding a place like Insight is the #1 thing you need to do.